With the return of Mega Evolutions in Legends ZA, I've been wondering if this marks a potential permanent return of the gimmick in some way. It carried over from Gen 6 to Gen 7, and I think people started thinking that Megas were just gonna be a thing forever now. Then, Gen 8 happened, and we got totally different gimmicks with Gigantamax and all that, and no more Megas. Generally, they were seen as the replacement for Megas in that gen, and with Gen 9, we've got Terras, which isn't really a new form. And it was around Scarlet and Violet that we saw more people than ever wanting the return of Mega Evolution to come back in some way. This has me thinking, with how people like Mega so much, should they just be in the mainline games as a permanent fixture? Let's think about this for a moment. First, let's talk about what Mega Evolutions exactly did to the games when they were first released. In X and Y, it was popular, but I don't think it was as well received as it is these days. It was still very liked, of course, especially since it gave the popular Kanto starters a new leash on life in competitive and stuff. But there were definitely some fans that thought it was a bit too gimmicky, or that it was just too much of a power boost. Strong, but otherwise standard Pokemon could become as strong as some of the legendaries with the use of a device on the trainer's wrist. Like, think about the first time you heard about it. An evolution on top of an evolution? Even if temporary, the concept is definitely a bit much at first glance. But its effect on the game? Largely pretty positive, at least in my opinion. But some people felt the balance was really off in the main game. And it is true. Beating X and Y is ridiculously easy compared to most previous entries, and Megas certainly don't help with that. What could have helped was more trainers actually having Megas, but it does make your own feel less unique. For competition, it was overall pretty good though, and many of the forms became popular with the fandom regardless of how good some of them were. Gen 7 would keep these around on top of yet another gimmick with Z-moves. Z-moves are definitely not my favorite gimmick, though it did not stop Gen 7 from being a good generation overall, and I think fans were still happy to have their Megas around. But then came Gen 8, and no more Megas. Gigantamax was the new hot form to use in battles, and it was even more ridiculous than Megas ever were. They weren't as memorable to fans, and even in competitive formats, they were basically banned. Like, even VGC didn't keep them around for the most part. Now, it is fair to enjoy Gigantamax and all, but there's no denying it just wasn't the same long-term success with fans like Megas were, which somehow felt much less gimmicky. Then, in Gen 9, we got Terras, which were less gimmicky than either in some ways. Like, there's not exactly a huge demand for merchandising on terraforms and aesthetic in the way you had with Megas. It's actually kind of surprising to see how restrained this gimmick is in that regard after the previous 3 games. Mechanically, I think Terra serves its purpose well enough, but as someone that prefers 1v1, it's definitely not the best. But it feels way more balanced in 2v2, which is the main official competitive format with Pokemon. So in a way, it's mostly working as intended. But I'm not dying to see it stick around in the same way some may have wanted Megas to stay going from Gen 6 to Gen 7. And that brings us to Legends ZA, which is also Gen 9, yet has no Terra mechanics. Or at least there haven't been any with the current information we have. But yeah, it's definitely not gonna be there, just like Gigantamax wasn't in Legends Arceus. But with ZA, we've got Megas back, much to great fanfare. And of course, it makes sense considering the region. But since it's been proven that Megas can exist just fine in other regions and concepts, should Megas just stick around forever? I'm not sure if I have a full answer to this question, but I'm gonna do my best. In short, the answer is no. But I do think they should be a recurring mechanic that rotates itself back into the series every now and then. I think the problem with Megas is that they may feel a bit mechanically stale after a while. Some felt that way after Gen 7. We were happy to see a Pokemon like Charizard pop off with its Megas, for example. But in the end, its regular form will always be its most iconic. And I think the development team should instead try to make these forms a bit more relevant in certain games, rather than constantly trying to boost them with typing changes and stat increases. But just the same, Mega Charizard X and Y are iconic in their own right, and shouldn't be abandoned just for that reason. This is why I think rotating the relevancy of Megas is the way to go. The fact that we took a break from them for quite a few years was a good thing for the series overall. It's not like the Mega forms were forgotten and not referenced at all anyway. So I think it's something that should always come back, but it should also be allowed to take breaks and allow for different mechanics or gimmicks. Not to mention, with the amount of spin-off potential Pokemon will always have, you can always use them there instead if they're not currently being used in a core game. But now, instead of asking if they should be around, let's ask if they will stick around. Is this a one-time thing for ZA, or will they be back in Gen 10? That's a tough one to answer, because they're gonna want to keep introducing new gimmicks with each generation. Like, every generation has brought new stuff, but gimmicks that very obviously alter the Pokemon or give them something insanely powerful have been the in thing specifically since X and Y. Having Megas around doesn't ruin this chance. As we saw in Gen 7, we had Megas and Z moves in the same generation designed in a way where they could coexist. But they would have to specifically design the new mechanic that way. This means if Megas do exist, the development team may feel like they have less creative freedom with what they can mechanically add to the games after a while. That's why Z moves were handled the way they were. And then suddenly both Megas and Z moves were gone in Gen 8 to make way for something totally different. Personally, I really do think it's 50-50 for Gen 10. Certainly, they've long since already made their decision regarding this matter. There's absolutely zero chance Gen 10 isn't already in a very deep phase of its development. So it's just a matter of time until we see what their decision is. I'm kind of leaning toward yes though. I do think Megas could stick around for a while again, but I also could be absolutely wrong about this. I'm not sure what other mechanic they'll associate with it, or how the battle system will change how it works. In ZA, Megas seem to be like a limited buff. I'm not sure if they'll add a limitation in the traditional games, since I'm still under the assumption that Gen 10's debut game will still be turn-based. And it was a permanent buff in battle in the 3DS games. I guess time will only tell. Overall, I do like the idea of Megas coming in and out in the series as a concept to keep things fresh. And I do predict this is the route they'll probably go, but only time will tell. But what do you think? Do you think Mega should be a permanent fixture in the series for every core game in the future? Or would you rather they take breaks from it every now and then? In the end, it is a mechanic I don't think will ever be gone permanently. But with that said, let me know your thoughts down below. I'm itching to hear what you guys have to say.